Welcome, friends. It's Ray. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today, I'm featuring part two of the Simon Says Stamp monthly kit for September. And in this video, I feature 7 cards I made with the kit. With card number 6, I have placed some carved pumpkin distress ink on my palette and some wild honey, and I am just roughly watercolor washing um, on my panel and have just put water on my brush and then took that to my palette to pick up some ink and then put that on my panel. And here I'm bringing in some twisted citron. Again, just roughly, I really want to shadow around the entire image. And so that's what I'm going for here. I'm not using a lot of water, but I do have my brush wet. Not a lot of water because I'm using 120-pound cardstock, not watercolor paper. And I have stamped my image using VersaFine Onyx Black ink. Here I'm bringing in some Salty Ocean, and these are all Distress Oxide inks. So I've stamped my panel using VersaFine Onyx Black ink, used some clear embossing powder to set the image, and because I knew that I was going to be applying color to the top. So here with my Salty Ocean, just um, placing a shadow of ink all around my image, bringing in more pink, that is worn lipstick, and then bringing in more yellow lightly. And that's what I'm doing. So now bringing in some mowed lawn because my twisted citron, I wanted that a little more green around the leaf area. And this is looking a little messy, but trust me, it comes together. But this is the look I wanted. So I'm lightly going over my jar. And my banner, in retrospect, would have left my banner white, but I'm going to keep going here. So this is the look that I want. I'm going to bring in one more color, and that is ground espresso, and color in just the center of my sunflower. Using mowed lawn, I'm going to continue greening up my leaves or the area around my leaves. Again, this is a more organic wash. I'm not trying to stay within the lines or nothing like that. I just want green in the area where there are leaves and then color in the remaining areas. And here I've cut a panel, an oval frame actually, out of a white panel, and using Hero Arts Infinity dies and bringing in my carved pumpkin, my twisted citron, and my wild honey, and just a little bit of water on my brush and picking up the color and just splattering it all over my panel. So these are some of the same colors that are on my main focal image. So this is an A2 card. So once my main panel is dry, I will cut that down, and then I've applied some double-sided tape to the back of my frame and applying a little liquid adhesive to the inside of the oval, and then I will place this on top of my main focal image. Placed an acrylic block on top to make sure that adheres, and then I will use double-sided tape and place that panel onto my A2 card base. And here I'm bringing in some multi-butterfly sequins. This is specialty sequins from Recollections. And I place a couple of butterflies on the floral bouquet and bring in some Nuvo crystal drops in White Blizzard to add a little more sparkle and shine to this panel. And lovely. Card number 7, I have already heat embossed on craft the large sunflower image from one of the stamp sets in the kit and used copper, gold, and silver Hero Arts embossing powder. Here I'm using some low-tack tape to tape my die frame onto my panel. Next, I bring in my trimmer, place my A7 or 5x7 panel, the corner at 3 inches, and then just line up the left corner and cut that on an angle. And I'm bringing in some washi tape, the washi tape from the kit in the various sizes, and am going to just go ahead and affix that using a little glue to the bottom half of my panel. And I'm going to do that all the way across this piece of the panel. I am using the Ranger Multimatte or Multimedia Matte glue. I always get that twisted up, but I will list it in the description below. I'm using that because it's a very thin glue, but it adheres very well. So I tend to use that for my sentiments or other areas where I want just a hint of glue. And the precision tip really works well um, with applying it to projects. So really like that. I continue this process until all of my tape is affixed, on the back with glue and wrapped around this bottom half of my panel. Once I have that finished, I am going to bring the turn both pieces of my craft panel over and bring both pieces together and just use regular tape to affix those together on the back. And then I cut, there's a little point at the end, cut that off so that, both sides are even. And then I'm applying the gold glitter washi tape from the kit and bringing in my glue and will place a thin strip of that on the back side of the washi tape. And I turn my panel over to the back and place a little glue on each side of the washi tape and fold that over to the back. Off camera, I have heat embossed my sentiment birthday, happy birthday, onto black cardstock and heat embossed using copper, gold, and silver embossing powder. Since those are the embossing powders I use on the panel, I wanted to use those same colors on my sentiment strips. I used a dry paper towel to wipe the embossing, the anti-static powder from the cardstock, and now I'm trimming those sentiment strips down. I've applied some liquid glue to the back of my sentiment strips and am placing those on either side of my diagonal washi tape. I place my acrylic block on top to make sure those adhere to my panel, and we'll bring in my copper liquid pearls that came in the kit, and some pale gold Nuvo crystal drops and liquid Mercury Nuvo crystal drops. And I place one drop of each on the top portion of my panel, and that finishes this card. Lovely. This might be my favorite card for this part 2 of the video. Let me know in the comments if you have a favorite. Card number 8 is a slimline card using pattern paper from the kit. And so the pink or top pattern paper cut 3.5, and then so 3.5 by 6, and then line it up at the 3 and 3/4 inch mark at the top, and then the bottom line it up at 3 3/4, and then you're cutting on an angle as I did here. We're going to do the same for a white sheet of cardstock, so that we can use it to line the back to give some depth to this top panel. I trimmed a sliver off of the right side so that the white cardstock is slightly smaller than my pattern paper, and then I'm going to affix the two together with some double-sided tape. Next, I placed my cardstock in my MISTI, prepped it for heat embossing, and used my acetate grid to line up the stamp on the panel. And then I'll close the door of my MISTI to grab the stamp once I have it positioned where I want it. And then we'll add or ink up my stamp using some Versamark ink. And of course, this is clear ink, very hard to see here, and I don't get the best impression, but we will go with that because I didn't know it at the time. I was trying to get best impression. So in hindsight, I should have stamped. I should have stamped and heat embossed before I lined the back with the white panel. Hindsight, right? So at any rate, we will fix that a little bit later. I'm going to go ahead and heat emboss this, and then I'm going to line up my bottom pattern paper to the length that I want to place it on my card base. And then once I get that lined up, I'm going to remove the top panel and stamp the bottom portion of the stamp on my bottom pattern paper so that it'll be easy for me to line these up after heat embossing both. I've done this design before in another video, and so I know that what I should have done here is temporarily applied adhesive to the back of my top panel pattern paper before placing the white panel behind it, right? and then temporarily adhering that to the bottom pattern paper in place and doing one stamp on top of those two together at one time. So if you're doing something like this, make sure you do it in the right order. I was not thinking, so then I had to go back and compensate. So just wanted to let you in on that. Now here I am placing my sentiment on my grid, acetate grid, and placing it where I want it on the front panel, adding some anti-static and applying Versamark ink. I heat embossed using Brutus Monroe Alabaster White embossing powder. Next, I heat emboss the image onto vellum, 40-pound Bazzill vellum. And this is really good for heat embossing. It doesn't warp very much, if at all. But you do need to make sure your heat gun is really hot, and then usually start it from the back and then take it to the front, and just eliminates or reduces the warping. I use the same white embossing powder for the vellum, and then I am going to fussy cut this out, really just the left flower. Gonna fussy cut that out, and I line up my bottom pattern paper and top and affix those together using double-sided tape. And then I'll take my vellum and apply some tape runner uh, throughout or all over the back, and then I will place that directly on my panel to cover the embossing hiccup there, and it looks pretty seamless, like it was meant to be. Yay, I love it. Okay, so now we will go ahead and apply double-sided tape to the back of the panel and affix that directly to the card base. And here I'm fitting just a piece of scrap paper to the top portion of the panel so that there is no dip or gap behind the panel. And then I will go ahead and affix that to the card base. So here I'm bringing in some embellishments. These are multi butterflies from Recollections. They're iridescent and they are called specialty glitter multi butterflies. So I am going to use my jewel picker and place 5 of those throughout my panel. And that finishes this card. I love the way it turned out. I am going to bring in some of the sentiment strips from the kit. My next card, card number 9, is a slimline card, and I'm starting with a craft panel. I am bringing in all of the washi tape from the kit except the gold glitter. And I am just making this card as organic as possible. I am using my thumb to tear the tape on the right side for each tape that I put down. I'm also adding some of my Ranger Multi-Matte Medium glue to affix that washi tape. And so I'm going to do this all the way down and up my panel. So completely cover the panel except for the tears on the right side. I'm bringing in my tweezers to help remove the tape once I get it placed, and then add a little glue and then put it back in position. Once done applying the washi tape to the front, I'm going to cut off the corners of the washi tape, apply liquid glue, and then fold those over to the back and pull tightly, not too tight, but tight enough so that the left side of my panel will be smooth when I'm done. I am going to bring in some of the sentiment strips from the kit, those that are plastic and are like the old-fashioned label makers, bringing those in, picking out any that are have a birthday theme, and placing 5 of those on my panel. Sorry, I lost a little footage here. So after I'm done with my panel, I do mount it onto a mat, a black mat, that leaves a 1/8 inch border. Place that, of course, on my card base using double-sided tape, and then bring in some of the copper liquid pearls from the kit and apply those on top, and I will show you the final card towards the end of the video. Card number 10 is a slimline card, and I start out using the 3 card stock colors from the kit, and have cut a large rectangle that's 3.5 by 1.5, and then a medium rectangle that's 3.5 by 1, and I've cut 3 each. I've used regular tape on the back to affix these all together, and I have alternated the small or the 1 inch and the 1.5 inch, and the colors, so that I start with yellow and go green, pink, and then start repeating. So now I'm placing that panel in my MISTI, and I'm bringing in the large floral image from one of the stamp sets, and we'll place that on my panel, and then bring in the smaller sunflower image from that same stamp set. I prep my panel with my anti-static powder and applied Versamark ink, and now I'm using some alabaster white Brutus Monroe embossing powder. After heat embossing the large image, I have moved my panel up in my MISTI and am figuring out the placement, because I want to stamp more of that image towards the bottom of my panel. I apply more anti-static powder and more Versamark ink and white embossing powder. Got a little smudge towards the right there, and I'm using my dry paintbrush to fix that by literally removing that embossing powder part of it and reapplying it. And ended up still having a little owie on that bottom image. So here I'm bringing in some 40-pound Bazzill vellum and am going to stamp a single flower, apply white embossing powder, and actually I stamped two flowers and am going to heat emboss those. I let my heat gun get really warm and am um, heat embossing and setting my powder, and will do the same for my vellum, and then I will fussy cut my vellum flowers out. Next, I place a scrap piece of paper in my MISTI and my stamp thank you, and using Hero Arts intense black ink will stamp that sentiment. I use a craft knife to um, remove the tape, and probably should have used some purple tape on the back or some low tack tape. But I thought with the heat embossing that I didn't want those to come apart. So here I'm placing them on a white card panel, and initially thought that I would not leave white space between, but decided I did like the white space much better. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go ahead and use some liquid adhesive. No, I'm using my tape runner to affix those to my panel. I am just eyeballing it, trying to leave about 1/8 of an inch in between each rectangle. And don't like to measure unless I absolutely have to measure. And probably should have measured on this panel because I do end up with more of a space in between my last couple of panels than I wanted, but that's exactly where I'm going to place my sentiments. So once I'm finished placing all of my panels, I mount my sentiment strip onto foam tape and place that right in the area where I have the most spacing to cover up that alley. I turn my card base over and use my scissors to trim off the each end of the sentiment strip, and then I bring in my diamond stickles and apply some sparkly drops throughout my panel, and that finishes this card. I have two more bonus cards. This card number 11 uses a Stars Stencil that I created. And I will link below to my DIY Stars Stencil video. Actually, I make more than just this stencil. I make a few more. But here I am applying um, ripe persimmon, twisted citron, and seedless preserves to my stenciled or to my panel, and blending those together. After removing my stencil, I will go ahead and wash that, set my panel aside to dry, and then come back in. I have two of the green cardstock strips, so not enough to fully mat my panel. So instead I will place one green strip down the left and one down the right of my panel. I am trimming my panel as I go and making sure that the width of the panel will be 3 3/8 so that then when I place this on my card base, I will have about 1/4 inch, maybe a little less, on of white space on either side of my card base. Turned my panel over and am placing a scrap piece of cardstock in the middle just to make certain that everything is level. And here I'm placing my panel onto my card base using double-sided tape, and then we'll bring in some of the stickers from the kit, and I am making an inspirational card thinking of my daughter who's away at college, and will send this to her. So I've added 3 of those sentiments to the front, and then we'll add some diamond stickles to the front and call this card done. Lovely. Card number 12 is also a bonus card. And here I start by using the die from, or the 2 dies from the kit, the Happy Birthday. And I have die cut these twice out of white 120-pound cardstock, and then once out of the green cardstock from the kit. And then I will use my Ranger Multimatte Medium to affix these together so that I have dimension on my sentiment. Here again, this Multimatte Medium glue with the precision tip really comes in handy. And I mostly use it for affixing die cut sentiments together, because it's thin but it dries clear and has a nice hold, and this precision tip really helps. While I finish up the sentiments, let me just say that I stamped the large sunflower image from the kit onto black cardstock, and heat embossed that with some purple embossing powder, and then used a lavender gel pen to color in all of my flowers, brought in a purple gel pen to add some depth and dimension. And I did all of that off camera while I was at the doctor's office, and just used gel pens for that, just experimenting, hadn't done that before. And here is that panel. I then trim that or I then use a waffle flower 5x7 Lacy layers die to cut out that focal panel. And then also to use some of the green cardstock from the kit to cut out a mat. And I use glue to mat those together, and then I place my sentiment onto my pan. I place an acrylic block on top of the sentiment to let that set. Then I use some Nuvo Purple Rain crystal glitter drops and place 3 of those at the top of the panel. And I'm calling this card done. Now let's take a closer look at all of the cards I made in today's video. I hope you liked the video and will give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing if not already a subscriber. If you have any questions, just let me know in the comments. As always, thank you so much for joining me today. Until next time, good day, friends.